Hey guys, I'm EJ and I'm going to give you a walkthrough of Blockpad, a new kind of engineering calculation software. Let's open up a new document to get started. So probably the first thing you notice about Blockpad is that it looks like a word processor. And in a lot of ways it's what it is. You can type in text and you can format that text, just like in a word processor. We've got all kinds of great word processor features like headers and footers and styles. But at its heart, Blockpad is a spreadsheet. So what do I mean by that? Let me show you an example. I'm going to press the equals sign and type in length equals 10 feet. I'll press the equal sign again, type in width equals 4 meters. Type the equal sign one more time, type in area equals length times, I'm going to click on width. Press enter. So as you can see, I'm calculating area using length and width, and just like in a spreadsheet, if I change these numbers, then my result updates too. And just by the way, Blockpad can do a whole lot more than this simple example. There's drawings and there's solvers and there's tables and actual spreadsheets, which I'm going to talk about later in this video. There's also custom functions and matrix math, and I could go on. But let's go back to our example. There's a lot that happened here, so I'm going to break it down. In Blockpad, when you press the equal sign, you open up a dynamic equation. And it works a lot like a spreadsheet formula. So you can type in math, right? 2 plus 3 squared divided by the square root of 4 minus 5. Then when I press enter, that formula calculates just like in a spreadsheet. But unlike in a spreadsheet, where the formula is hidden behind a cell where you can't see it, we display the formula in clear math notation. For engineering, this is really important, right? Being able to follow along and check your work as you go is really crucial. And if you ask engineers, even ones that like spreadsheets, what do you think are the problems with spreadsheets? 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you, I can't see stuff, I can't follow along, everything's hidden and it's hard to read. So in Blockpad right away, instead of doing that, we show the formula in this understandable notation. So probably the second thing you noticed is that I use names, length, width, area. And in Blockpad, we think names are important, so we make them really easy. First, you just open up a dynamic equation, type the name in this case a sub 1, and then an equals sign, and then the rest of the formula. So 3 minus 2 divided by 3. Now we've got this named value, and we can use it in equations. Can press the equal sign, can click on it, and then do a calculation, can also type it in. It's that easy. You can also go back to old formulas and type in a name at the beginning, in this case b sub 1, and then press the equal sign, and now that one's named too, so we can use that in equations. So for engineering, this is also really important because engineers, they're dealing with all kinds of values and numbers, and there's a lot to keep track of. Being able to give something a meaningful name that you can then use in the equations that you write is really helpful. It's incredibly helpful. It's hard to really overstate that. And Excel just makes it the worst, right? It's B5 minus C27, and you have to go digging for what those mean. You can't just look at it and see. And it's just this confusing mess of numbers and letters. So Blockpad, we make it easy. You have these names that you can give meaningful stuff. And Excel, they help you out by highlighting cells, and there's tricks and stuff you can do, but in Blockpad we have that too. If you use something, then it highlights A1 plus B1. So probably the third thing you noticed is that I used units. Length is in feet and width is in meters, and then when I go to calculate area, I don't do any conversion of meters to feet. Blockpad does that for me. In Blockpad, we know units are really important. for engineering calculations, so we make it really easy. As an example, I have this value called mass. Press the equal sign, 5, and then to give it the units of kilograms, I just type in kg. That's it. Or as another example, force equals 7 N for newtons. Or time equals 3 min for minutes. And for compound units that combine these basic ones, you just use normal math operators when you assign the unit. So as an example, I have speed equals 5 ft divided by min, and that's feet per minute. Or as another example, I have torque equals 4 ft times pound for foot-pounds. Or volumetric flow equals 4 feet cubed divided by min for minutes. And I'm going to actually go back and, changing units, say, oops, I meant that to be feet per second. I can just change that to second, and it's that straightforward. And using these units, they're not just fancy labels that you have. They're actually meaningful for Blockpad calculations. Blockpad will auto-convert, will multiply, and will cancel out units as appropriate. So what that looks like in practice is if I press the equal sign and type in 1 centimeter plus 1 inch plus 1 foot, Blockpad converts the inch and foot values to centimeters first and then adds that all up. Blockpad also multiplies units as appropriate. So for example, if I multiply force here times width, then I get the answer in Newton times meter torque value. Also, if I take speed and divide that by time, then I get my answer in feet per second squared, the acceleration value. And notice that Blockpad converts time, the 3 minutes, to seconds before doing the calculation. It takes care of that for you. Blockpad also does cancellations as you need it. So volumetric flow times time, the minutes cancel out, and we just get our answer in feet cubed. It'll also, if I do torque divided by force, then those force values, pounds and newtons, those cancel out, and we just get our answer in feet. And notice Blockpad automatically converts pounds and newtons, so that works out. So this is really useful. One more thing I want to show you is, what if you want to see a number in a different unit? So what if I want to see this value here in meters? In Blockpad, you use the to keyword. So I just type TO and then the unit you want to see. In this case, M for meters. And then it converts. You can do that anywhere, right? So here I'll say 2 centimeter cubed per second. And Blockpad does that for me. Or if I want to see area in square yards, I type 2 YD for yard and then squared. That's all it takes. And going back to cancellations for a second, Blockpad will cancel out units as it needs to, but it doesn't always know that you want it to. And as an example, if I take 4 psi, multiply that by 1 inch, I get my answer in 4 psi times inch. But probably you wanted to see that in pounds per inch. And to do that, you just use the to keyword again. Here, 2 pound per inch. And Blockpad takes care of it. And there's no danger of accidentally converting to something that it can't. Here, if I say 2 pounds, I get an error because that's not a possibility when you're multiplying psi times 1 inch. So I'll change this back to pounds per inch. So this is also incredibly useful for engineering. Engineers are working with units all the time. It's the way the world works. And in Excel, I can guess probably some of your workflow. You're always Googling conversion factors and you're working them into your Excel sheet. And you're kind of just painstakingly making sure that everything multiplies, everything cancels, everything's doing what it should. And it can end up being a huge headache And Blockpad, we let the computer take that headache away from you because there's no reason that you should be worried about all that stuff. There's more important things for engineers to be spending their time on. And it helps you catch errors as you go. In Excel, you could easily type in 1 foot plus 1 meter. In Excel, will give you the answer as 2. And that's obviously not the right answer. Or even worse, you could say 1 foot plus 1 pound. Blockpad, Excel would tell you, oh, that's 2 feet or 2 pounds. In Blockpad, you get an error saying, I'm sorry, feet and pounds can't be added together. That doesn't work. So units are incredibly useful. I'm going to move on and talk about functions for a little bit. Blockpad has all the kind of functions that you need in a spreadsheet. Like, for example, I can take sine of 30, and I'm taking the sine of 30 radians. But these functions, they also work with units. So I can take the sine of 30 degrees, and I get the answer for degrees there. Similarly, if I take the average of 1 centimeter, 1 inch, and 1 foot, then Blockpad does those auto conversions, and we get our answer in centimeters. Also, if I take the square root of 5 inches squared, I get my result in inches, as you should. Like I said, Blockpad has all the kind of functions that you need, including even VLOOKUP functions, which I'll cover a little bit when I talk about tables. But there's one more function I wanted to show you, and that's the if function. So I want to make this value called number, and I want to write an if statement that says whether this is positive or negative. So it works just like a spreadsheet if function. I type if, then I have my condition. So if number is greater than or equal to 0, I want it to return positive. And by the way, these quotation marks, they're just to say that this is a text value. Otherwise, return negative. When I press enter, just like in a spreadsheet, it says, okay, number it is greater than or equal to 0, so it returns positive. But instead of keeping it as this confusing looking if function, well, in regular spreadsheet just hides it. But instead of keeping it as this if function, it shows it as a logic table that's really readable. You just read return positive if number is greater than or equal to 0, return negative otherwise. And this can be really helpful for a lot more complicated if statements, like especially when you have nested if values and the function starts to look a little bit confusing. And this updates just like a spreadsheet, just going to drive that home. If I do -5, then it changes my answer to negative. One more thing I want to show you with formulas, and that's the show steps property. I'm going to click on area here and go to the properties window. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and there's this value called show steps, which I may be in the way, but I'm going to change it to yes. And when I do that, notice on this equation, this little line here is added 12 feet times 5 meters. What that's doing is Blockpad showing the step of, okay, we have length and width, let's plug those in so that you can see what they are before you get the answer. And that can be helpful. Maybe you want to see why a value is too small or too big, or it can be helpful if you're going to print a PDF for someone to read along that way. So right, there's a lot of cool stuff that I just showed you. You might be thinking this is pretty awesome, or maybe, I don't know. But there's a whole lot you can do with just what I've showed you. But if you're used to working in Excel, then it might feel a little limiting. You might be used to the kind of tabular format. And at Blockpad, we know that that kind of format's really useful for a lot of stuff in engineering. So we do have spreadsheets and mini-spreadsheets, which we call tables. So to insert a table in a Blockpad document, I'm going to just go to a new page real quick. To insert a table, you click on Table, and you specify the rows and columns, then click OK. And when you do that, now you've got this mini spreadsheet in your document. And just like in a spreadsheet, you can type in numbers, you can press the equal sign, and then you can run calculations on those numbers. And you can scroll down just like using a spreadsheet. And then what's cool about Blockpad tables is that you can use those units intelligence features that I showed you above. So we can have 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch. And these calculations are giving me inches squared because I'm taking the square of them. And also if I click on this cell and multiply it by 4 psi, then I get my answer in pounds force because I'm multiplying psi times inches squared. And you may have noticed in these tables that we're not showing these formulas in clear math notation. And didn't I just say that was a bad thing a few minutes ago? Well, I guess there's a little nuance there in that at Blockpad, we know it's important that you can see your work and show it. So we make that the default for documents. But when you're looking at tables, what's a lot more important than that is being able to clearly read the tabular data, the data that's there. And what happens when you show formulas is it just gets cluttered. So, in Blockpad, you can actually show the formula. I'm going to show you how. You just highlight the cells, go to the properties window, scroll down to the bottom, and there's this value here. I know I'm in the way. It's called show formula. I'm going to change it to yes. And when I do that, now we're showing the formulas and the results in all these cells. As you can see, it looks kind of cluttered and it makes it so that the table's harder to read. So for tables, we think reading the table is the most important thing. So by default, we don't show that formula. And I'm going to turn that back off. And by the way, the properties window over here that I opened to do that, it has all kinds of properties for all the different objects in Blockpad. So cells, equations, reports, spreadsheets. And if you ever need to change something, here's a good place to look. If you don't see it in the toolbar, look here, you might find it. But I'm going to close it. So back to our document. What's cool about Blockpad tables is you can use those table values in your calculations. It's really straightforward. It works just like using a spreadsheet. So I'll press the equal sign and say total forces equals. Then I use the sum function and click and drag on these cells to highlight them. And that's how I can take the sum of those cells. It's that straightforward. Just as another example, I can take the average length and I'll use the average function and then click and drag on these cells. And that's all I have to do. And notice that Blockpad puts this table 1 there in front of the cell names. And Blockpad does that because you can have multiple tables in one document. So I can press this table sign again and insert a new table with all the spreadsheet stuff. So when you're calculating those values, you need to tell Blockpad which table to look into. In this case, table 1. And you can change that name to make it more meaningful. To do so, you click on this tab here and open the properties window. And I can change the name to say something like numbers table. Notice my formulas update because now they're looking at numbers table. But that's a little long. I like short names for tables. So here I'll say nums. And I'll change the title to nums too. That way now we've got nums, nums. That's how it is. So what's a good use for this? One that I really like is just regular old lookup functions. So as an example, I have this fatigue calculation, and in this fatigue calculation, I need to find this value KD, and it depends on temperature based on this table. So I have my VLOOKUP interpolate function, which, by the way, you're not going to find that in Excel. That's a function that's special to Blockpad. And that's because we noticed that in Excel, it can be really a pain to interpolate values. They make it more complicated than it needs to be. So we made VLOOKUP interpolate, which works just the same as a VLOOKUP function, but instead of stopping at one value or the other, it'll interpolate between values. So we have VLOOKUP interpolate. Our lookup value is the operating temperature. We're looking up in this temp effects table, A2 to B10, returning column 2. And that's all there is to it. It works just like using VLOOKUP in Excel. And notice that operating temperature is in Fahrenheit, but our lookup table here is in Celsius. And Blockpad's not worried about that. It does that conversion automatically. And just for reference, I'll type in 2C here. You can see the value is 371 degrees C, which if you look in our table, our answer looks about right. And another use case for spreadsheets and engineering calculations is to look at different scenarios of something like different beams, or maybe you want to see how something changes over time. And for that, tables in a document can feel a little bit narrow. So we have actual spreadsheets. If I go back to my document, to insert a new spreadsheet in this file, I come over here where it says report 1 and find this plus sign. And then I'll click spreadsheet. What I did just now is insert a new spreadsheet sheet in this file. So as a little background, this column over here, these are like sheets in a spreadsheet. So you can insert multiple spreadsheets. You can also insert multiple reports, which are the word processor type documents that we were working in the beginning. And just like in conventional spreadsheets, you can reference values from other sheets. So if I come to sheet 1 and press the equal sign, I can navigate to report 1 and scroll to width. And when I click on it, I see report 1.width. I'm going to click OK. And so I have that value here, and I can do calculations with it like normal. And so that way you can link stuff back and forth between your reports and your spreadsheets. I also want to mention here it says report 1.width, and that's the same as tables. Blockpad needs to know which report you're looking in to find the width value. And you can change these names. Say I'll call this doc1. And that way now, here I have doc1.width. Just also, by the way, this spreadsheet, just to be clear, it works just the way I showed you tables work. So I can say 3 inches squared, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can come back over here, press the equal sign, click on the cell, multiply that by 4 psi, press enter, and drag it down. Just like I showed you in tables, it works just like a spreadsheet. And in the same way that I referenced this doc1 value, oops, I'm going to undo that. I can reference spreadsheet values. So I can scroll down here. If I press the equal sign, then I can click on sheet 1. And if I click and drag the cells, like I showed you with the tables, and click OK, then now I've got these values. And I meant to say sum. I guess I'm showing you a little bit of the array functions. But if I take sum of those values, then I get the total. That's straightforward. It's that easy. And that's most of what I wanted to show you in this video. Like I said earlier, there's all kinds of more functions in Blockpad. The drawings, blocks, library, custom functions, matrix math, imaginary numbers, all kinds of stuff. But I'm not going to get to that in this video. But what I really like about Blockpad is that just with these simple features that I showed you, the tables and clear equations, the units, you can create clear, readable, really understandable calculation documents that you'd be happy to share with somebody or turn into your boss or your client. Just as a small example of that, I have this fatigue calculation here that I showed you earlier. At the top, I have my title, I have the sections labeled, I have my inputs, the calculations, and I'm calculating K values. I have these logic tables and these lookup tables. And then for SE here, where I use all those K values, I'm showing steps. And then at the bottom, we have these really complicated looking equations, which, I mean, you can imagine they'd be a nightmare in Excel, but here they're readable and you can see what's going on. So that wraps up this video. You can find a link to our website below where you can find all kinds of more resources on how to use Blockpad, including stuff I've covered in this video and stuff I didn't get a chance to get to. You can also start a free trial and let us know what you think. But we really believe that Blockpad has the power to change how you do calculations for the better. Thank you for your time.